The story begins at the end of the war, where the world is destroyed and 10 great knights got defeated and dead due to lack of mana and energy. Everything happened because of the one demon, the general of demonic beasts Gluttony. He mocks over the main character whose name is Tiny, telling him that he is completely useless. This makes our hero incredibly angry. That's why he tries his best using every last of his strength to strike at least one blow to the monster, to which the monster responds that this is absolutely nothing for him. Tiny finally explodes. He puts his hammer behind his back and with a sharp movement not only kills the monster entirely but also tears it into two with his skill lighting. Tiny is sure that he will also die, and mana is not enough to get recovered. After that we are shown flashbacks from his childhood. It turns out that only nobles or famous knights are taught mana training methods. But our main character has learned only the basic and error methods. As soon as he rose to the top of knighthood, it seemed that all such problems were behind him, but somehow not. So he thinks maybe if they had trained him properly, Tiny would have saved not only the continent but everyone. Then it turns out that Gluttony was only the one general of the 7th. Which means that the others are much stronger. Now he is addressed by the Emperor of the Sword, who is near death. Despite knowing he will die for sure, why the knight did not run away from the battlefield and charges towards the demon general instead. To which he receives the answer that Tiny does not like to look weak and pathetic, especially since he believes that a real man should keep his head high. The Emperor laughs but believes him, and then asks to find him. When Tiny returns, Emperor tells him a little secret by which he will be able to find out if this is true. The little secret is that his unborn daughter's name is Lily, in honor of their beloved flower with his wife at the same time. But the Emperor doesn't like that flower. This is the most important part of the secret. We are shown that Tiny is surrounded by some kind of blue aura and a ring sparkles on the man's finger. The knight's world disappears in the dark. We are again shown Tiny's flashbacks. The guy remembers watching his sister's death, being near death for several days. First some men beat her for hiding the ring, in fact it was Tiny. And then another time when they broke into their house. They were about to take the body away and sell it for organs. Or to someone else, when the beaten Tiny moved his hand, causing it to glow with a blue light. Time to act. He rushes at the offenders and beats one. Then covers the corpse of his sister. He believes this is a dream. But it's not a dream. The Sword Emperor really sent him to the past in order to change the future. He is angry that he was not sent a few days earlier so that he could protect his sister, but then he realizes that the Emperor himself was not confident in his abilities. Even so, he had a chance to say goodbye to his sister. The scumbag who killed his sister is called Wolf, and the main character swears that he will take full revenge on him in this life. Karina, it turns out, is not his relative. They just both have black hair, which on the continent is a sign of failure, because of which Tiny was regularly harassed. Emma, Karina's friend, is also present at the funeral and notices that the Tiny is not himself. Even when the death of the boy's sister had just occurred, she saw him eating near the corpse, after picking her up on his own and thanking him for the food. The wounds on him disappeared. A month later he goes to the wolf. There he is met by henchmen with whom he deals very skillfully. We are also told that Tiny has a secret technique, the use of 2 bodies to multiply due to the perfect combination of a body consisting of mana. A mana body in his own. In his previous life he was not in the right position, but now everything is different. Tiny sends one of the henchmen flying towards the robber's house, where he later goes inside. There he also deals with the wolf and other bandits. It turns out that he was not the main one, but the Rander's brothers who watched this scene from the stairs. The commotion begins. The brothers understand that the boy uses mana, which means that his corpse can be sold more expensive. Tiny from a previous life remembers that using a corpse as a weapon is not very good. So he decides to fight a fist fight. Randers attack him, but our main hero manages to dodge and instantly blows the brothers to pieces. After that we are shown a real wolf who is the leader of the invaders. In fact, he is a beast man whose race is one of the strongest. Moreover, a man is also a silver wolf, which indicates that he is a direct descendant of the imperial family. In a previous life Tiny barely managed to kill him. But in this one he will finally ask what he wanted and then beat him. The man of course is not happy with such a visit, so he turns into a wolf, but for some reason his fur is not silver but red. The boy grabs him by the nose, remembering how in the past a fellow beast man told how to treat their race. In a moment of madness the former knight hits him on the nose, causing the wolf to fly into the wall and a stone falls out of his mouth. He turns back into a human and begins to beg for forgiveness, apologizing all the time to his sister. Tiny takes notices of Pebble and then takes it in his hand, realizing that it is demonic energy. And in it is a silver wolf in chains. Tiny is heading somewhere with her friend in order to look at mystical creatures. These are creatures that appeared during the accumulation of mana by their organisms over several centuries. Later we find out that the essence of the spirit is contained in that very stone. The former knight decides to break the shackles and free the spirit of the wolf. He sees his memories. The wolf is surrounded on all sides by people with demonic energy, beat him to death and give the spiritual stone to some child so that he becomes a beast man. Tiny came too early in this life, which is why the wolf did not have time to fully stroke the spirit of a fellow. But then he notices that the animal wants to attack but stops him in time, saying that he must suffer. Surprisingly, the spirit understands him. Later we see the flashback again with that girl. She says that a person can become a spiritual magician if he has a pure soul and a decent amount of mana. Only children are innocent enough for this. Once again in the present we understand that he can communicate with the wolf not because he is innocent but because his mana penetrated the stone and filled its fragments. That is why they can conclude a contract. The girl the guy talked to during the flashbacks is one of 10 great knights. She says that as long as mana supports the existence of spirits, they will live and help, and most of them even become stronger to match their magician. The wolf asks to fulfill his request to take revenge on everyone who was involved in the murder, to which the boy willingly agrees. The contract was concluded and the wolf got a new name. They decide to ask the pleading man where he got the stone, but when he starts talking about the organization his head explodes sharply and he falls dead. Tiny finally goes into the treasury and takes the ring of the Valencia family. According to the flashback we learned that this ring was given to him by the youngest daughter of the Emperor of the Sword, Chloe von Valencia, who traveled all over the kingdom in honor of her 16th birthday. Here the captain of the guard of the outer fortress, Phils, who covered them for money, is brought into the building. He sees the boy and decides to deal with him, but it all boils down to the fact that Tiny intimidates him with the spirit of the wolf and the man retreats. The Tiny decides to bribe the captain of the guard to become the main one in this place, and so that he makes an appointment with Lord Phils, to which guard reluctantly agrees. And those who barely survived he orders to bring all the women and beggars in an hour, otherwise he will kill them. Soon absolutely everyone was in the building. The death of the wolf scared them, but Tiny managed to calm them down by saying that he had proof that Lord Phils had deceived Duke. We hear the guards talking. They are discussing especially about what happened to the captain of the Gwar. He was put on probation, that all establishments are closed and the money from the gang has completely evaporated, which is why the Lord calls their new leader. Tiny had previously freed everyone and given them the wolf's money. Now the guards of course do not believe him when they see a child in front of them, but after the wolf spirit shows up they immediately fall silent and retreat to the sides. After that he meets with the Grand Master of the Knightly Order of Phils Cran, who is not particularly positive towards the main character. But the letter puts him in his place in time, saying that he is certainly not more important than the Lord. There is a verbal altercation between them before Tiny confronts Lord. Afterward we are introduced to Lord Tim and Von Phils. He looks completely different than in the past. Then he learns that the boy wants to enter his service, but the Lord first of all wants to hear an explanation of why the kid ruined almost all his property. Tiny says it's for his own good, but the guard is not happy with this answer. Wanting to throw the kid out, however, the Lord immediately stops him, telling him that Duke Valenti has started to fight drugs and prosecution. The Lord remembers the event with the arrival of someone else's daughter on her 16th birthday and then still agrees to take him into service and even reward him. But first he must tell him if he stole the wolf from the spiritual stone. Thanks to the moon wolf the boy can feels out someone else's aura and comes to the conclusion that he owns demonic energy and is a dark magician. Demons on the other hand never lend their powers without sacrifice, and the second level magician is either a lunatic who has killed hundreds of people or sacrificed dozens. Apparently he bought the corpses from the invaders without waiting for an answer. The Lord orders Crayon to attack. Tiny calls the wolf, but the fight never happens as the master of the Knight's Order and begin to discuss with his master. He has almost reached the second level and is now almost equal to the knights, and not a single thread of mana flows out. The Lord still decides to ask the boy who taught him this. Tiny lies that his late parents taught him this, and it's just a breathing technique, and since the Lord accepted refugees from everywhere, he cannot refute the words of Tiny and believes him. But he talks about someone who will clarify the details, but for now he asks the former knight to live here because it's necessary to blame someone else. Tiny thinks it's about one of the members of the organization that Wolf mentioned before he died, but this has not been confirmed yet. If the same guest of Phil's arrives in 15 days and that's how much time it takes to check the accounting book, the collection of the proof and time required to arrive the army is same. Then the plan will work, but unfortunately the unknown will arrive in a week. Tiny discusses what he should do. He could have escaped, but then he would have been put on the wanted list and it would not be possible to meet with the Sword Emperor. So he would have to wait for a guest. The Lord spoke of him as some kind of aristocrat. But there was no commotion in the house, which aroused suspicion. Perhaps this is a secret visit. That is why some high-profile event in Phil should happen so that people would pay attention to it. And the meeting would have to go smoothly. After that we find ourselves in the dining room, where the boy absorbs a lot of food so that his mana amount grows. But after a while a man calls out to him. Not only a verbal altercation ensues between them, but also a small fight which they decide to continue on the street. But there is only one outcome. Sir Grant lost to him. Tiny begins to rejoice in victory. His world abruptly fades. They explain to us why this happened. During the battle all the mana was depleted and he just overdid it. As it turned out there really was a lord behind this and it was just a test. He and the boy have breakfast together, discussing what happened in Tiny himself since he adheres to manners and knows history, which of course the aristocrat really likes. The Lord keeps repeating that some person explained to him the value of the Tiny and considered it almost a jewel. After that Tiny continues to train along the way, talking about the second stage of mana in the circle. Since Crayon and Phil's have already reached it, 3 days later he became much stronger, but in this life he has nothing to be a bully. For since his men is now functioning normally, his commander calls him and says that the gentleman ordered to arm the Tiny but no weapon suits him. So Tiny asks the man if he can take his weapon. Naturally he receives a refusal since he certainly did not want to give the precious artifact named Sadness to him. But the boy brings him to emotions because he says that the sword fits perfectly only to him. And if the commander wants to check it then they should fight. The man can't stand it and swings his sword. A beaten Tiny comes out of the room apologizing to the commander, but dragging something with him. By that time we are shown a lord who is 100% sure that the boy is from the families of nobles. Because if not then both of them will have to pay a terrible price for it. After reflecting on this topic he goes to bed, but after a while he wakes up as warning magic with a characteristic sound began to press on his ears. He is about to get up but then the same sword is stuck in his chest and Tiny turns out to be the one. In the morning everyone is in shock as soon as Phil's corpse is found. One of the men notices the sword, indicating that it belonged to the commander. Many people think he was so mad because Tiny could replace him. That's why they all decide to investigate. Many testimonies stop at only one person, a boy. That's why they decide to call him for questioning. The hero is still beaten up, says that he went into the room with Cran, but in the end he came out with only bruises. The man is not so sure of this because no one has seen him in the estate after that incident. The information guard gets from Tiny also matches with the others. Now Tiny is not sure what's going to happen to him. He also mentioned that the Lord has assured his safety, to which the guard asks Tiny to come in the morning at same place. Now our hero is confused that why he is asking to come same place in the morning. Next day he meets with the guard. To his surprise the guard gives him money and mercenary plate which will come in handy for moving freely. Guard suggests him to go outside this town, where his talent is going to waste. You should leave this place and make a name out of your talent. Tiny also not planning to stay there, as the Imperial Guard will arrive soon to investigate the Black Magician of Noble. With this in mind he is ready to leave for the Imperial, where he can have a chance to meet with the Sword Emperor. Suddenly his tamed wolf pops up to give him a ride. He remembers that riding a wolf is something like only the orc can do. A mere human will vomit and lose his conscience after riding the wolf. But the wolf is not in the mood to listen and he takes him on the back. The size of spirits in their main body is huge, but when they manifest their body after the contract made, their sizes depend on the master, so he pours the mana in the wolf for becoming one with the wolf. The wolf gets sharp and stiff after successfully linking the soul with master. The wolf takes off with speed which Tiny never imagined. Alongside all the senses linked with wolf he can sense and see all the things which wolf can see. Now he is ready to meet with the Duke.